الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين بالقاسم محمد أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا أما بعد فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى وقوله الحق وهو أصدق القائلين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اعلموا أنما الحياة الدنيا لعب ولهو وزينة وتفاخر بينكم وتكاثر في الأموال والأولاد كمثل غيث أعجب الكفار نباته ثم يهيج فتراه مصفرا ثم يكون حطاما وفي الآخرة عذاب شديد ومغفرة من الله ورضوان وما الحياة الدنيا إلا متاع الغرور صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات بيجي محمد Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Continuing with the tafsir of Surah Hadid, I just recited verse number 20, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, know that the life of this world is mere diversion and play, glamour and mutual vainglory among you and rivalry for wealth and children. Like rain, whose growth impresses the farmer, then it withers and you see it turn yellow. Then it becomes chaff. Whereas in the hereafter, there is forgiveness from Allah and His approval and a severe punishment. The life of this world is nothing but the wares of delusion. So we see in this 20th verse of Surah Hadid, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the concept of this worldly life. As to this worldly life is nothing but childish play. Lahwun wa la'bun is delusion, is diversion, it's a game, in other words. Now, is it game for everyone? This is where we want to go into the tafsir of this ayah to see what the Ma'asumeen have said as far as the Mufassirin, quoting the different narrations in this ayah. Second verse in this chapter begins with i'lamu. There was another verse earlier that began with the word i'lamu. That means let it be known. Make sure that you know. The second ayah, which starts with i'lamu, let it be known, is basically giving us a heads up. Right away when someone wants to tell you, he says, oh, make sure, let it be known, make sure you do this. So in other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also giving us a heads up. Let it be known. Make sure you know this. i'lamu annama al-hayatu dunya la'ibun wa lahbun. That know that the life of this world is mere diversion and play. It's nothing but glamour and mutual vainglory among you and the rivalry for the wealth and the children. That's what people are running after. Either running after the wealth or they're running after the awlad, the children. Both of them are being considered over here as the signs which insan runs after. So we see the word ghaith, which is being given as an example over here, comes from ghiyath, is in the meaning of beneficial rain. The word matar could be used for harmful rain which sometimes harms us, but whereas ghiyath is always beneficial. It is called ghaith since it is a reply to the weeping and the need of mankind. When people ask for the rain, the ghiyath is the return of that rain which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends down. The word kuffar over here, which is used in this ayah, says, towards the end of it says, "A'jab al-kuffaru nabatuhu." This is where we understand that if you don't look at the verses with the proper tafsir, you will not understand as to what means what over here. Here the word kuffar, if you were to ask what does kuffar mean, you will say, well, kuffar is a plural for kafir, those who disbelieve. But what does it say over here in this context? It says, "A'jab al-kuffaru nabatuhu thumma yahiju fatarahu musfarra." What does the word kuffar over here refer to? Kuffar in this verse is not in the meaning of unbelievers. Rather, it is referring towards farmers. You say, well, what farmers have done that we're calling them kuffar? No, this is in terminology, it is referring towards them as kuffar. Why? Since the word kufr originally means to cover something. What does kafir do? Kafir covers up the truth. That's what kuffar is. That's where the word has come about. So the word kufr means to cover something up. What does a farmer do? Farmer does the same thing. Covers up the seeds. When it puts it in the ground, covers them up. So the job of the farmer is the same as what the word kufr means. So in Arabic, the word literally means kufr, to cover something up. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using the word kuffar for the farmers over here. Ajabal kuffaru nabatuhu. The kuffar, or these farmers over here in this regards, are, in ta'ajjub. They're astonished. Why? Because, it impresses them how the thing grows out of it, that they only had placed the seed under the ground, they had buried it, then they covered it up, and how it comes out. So it sort of impresses them and astonishes them. So the word kuffar over here, the same way kafir hides, kuffar, or the word farmers do the same thing. Yahij comes from the word hayjan in two meanings. One, drying up of the herbs. With the herbs, they dry up, the plants when they dry up. Or fermentation, or excitement. Hutam means the herb that dries up quickly. World is a mere diversion and play. This ayah, this particular ayah, this sentence has appeared in Quran on 4 different occasions. One is over here in Surah Hadid, verse number 20. Second is in Surah An'am, the first time that was mentioned, وَمَا الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا لَعِبٌ وَلَهْوٌ. That what is the worldly life except lahav wa la'ab, diversion and a game, in other words, which is being mentioned over here, diversion and a play. Second place in Surah Ankabut, verse 64 said, وَمَا هَذِهِ الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا لَهْوٌ وَلَعَبٌ. In An'am it was la'ab wa lahav. In Ankabut is lahav first and then la'ab. What's the wisdom behind it? Allah is the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In Surah Muhammad, verse 36 says, annama, or innama al-hayatu dunya la'abun wa lahab. So the first ayah started with wama, negative. What is except this? Second ayah is also wama hadhihi al-hayat. Third is innama, it's making it hasr. Only the hayatu dunya is this, and there's nothing else besides it. And then over here it says i'lamu annama al-hayatu dunya. Let it be known that the hayat of dunya is so and so. We can summarize that these 4 verses about world as such. Whenever the world becomes our aim and objective, it will be considered diversion and play. But whenever it is used as a means or prelude for the hereafter, it is praised. So not always the earth or the world is condemned. It's only condemned when we use it for these worldly gains and we make it to be our objective and our aim. But when we are using this world as cultivation or as a land where we're planting something for tomorrow, then obviously it is a place which is praised. So you're doing things, you're creating things for yourself in this world which will be beneficial in the hereafter. This world is much praised from the ahadith, and as well as Quran is praising it. So we see this verse points out different stages of man's life: childhood, youth, adolescence, and the old age. Or I would say, even beyond adolescence, reaching the age of mid-age group, whatever you want to call it, that place. It explains that in every stage of our life, we can be occupied with this world. When you're a child, you're occupied. When you're in youth, you're occupied. When you grow out of the youth age, you're still occupied. When you're at an old age, you're still occupied. How? For example, during childhood and youth years, you're occupied with fun and games. That's all you see. That's all you want to do. When you're young, that's all is in your mind. When you grow a little bit, get into the adolescence, you start working, get down to business a little bit, start taking some responsibility. In these years, you're occupied with self-decoration and adornment. You're always looking after yourself and obviously the family of yours. So you're always after this adornment and decoration. During the middle age or the old age, one is occupied with pride, glamour, and vainglory. Now that you've gone old, everything, you've retired or whatever, at this age, you just sit and you take pride in what you have done. Or you take, you consider there's this vainglory that comes out of insan. So in every aspect of the life, insan is occupied by this world, whether it be young age or whether it be the old age or the advanced age. Previous verses were talking about the sadaqah and qardul hasana. This verse mentions the elements which prevent one from doing infaq. Those verses, first Allah SWT went ahead and said how good it is to do infaq, how good it is to loan a beautiful loan to Allah, how good it is to give sadaqat. Innal musaddiqina wal musaddiqat, all of the ajrun lahum, what they have, rewards and whatnot. Now it says, what are the things that keep you from making this infaq, keep you from making this contribution and this charity? This world, this worldly life. Why? It's nothing but diversion, delusion, vainglory, and a means of play. Messages that we learn from this ayah: understanding the reality of the world requires in-depth analysis and deep thinking. That's why Allah starts with the ayat, "I'lamu," let it be known. Before you get into the ayat, "Annamal hayatu dunya la'ibun lahab," it says, "I'lamu," let it be known. So you gotta have pondering over it. You gotta think about it and contemplate. Quran wants to educate us and change our misperception about the world. "Wa'lamu annamal hayatu dunya la'ibun wa lahab." Let it be known, this world, if used for these gains, is nothing but diversion and child's play. If you use it for your benefit for the hereafter, yes, then there's meaning to this world. Beauties of the world are temporary and disappear quickly. It says, وَزِينَةٌ تَرَاهُ مُصْفَرًّا. The zinat, the decorations, what happened? تَرَاهُ مُصْفَرًّا. They've turned yellow. That means they've dried up. So all the beauties that you see once today, later on they will dry up. So there's only temporary beauty that you see in the world. Games and entertainment is among the features of the worldly life. But if it isn't utilized in the right manner, it will turn into wrath of the hereafter. It says, Zinatun wa tafakhur. You take pride, you make it adornment. What is the end result? Fil akhirati adabun shadid. At the end of the day, there will be a great torment. Multiplicity in children and wealth is only virtuous when it doesn't lead to us to the hell. Why? We don't need this wealth and these children if they're going to lead us to the hell. So that's the only child is wanted, even Ibadur Rahman, when they're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, grant us children. We said we count that to be the attribute of Ibadur Rahman. You say, why is it the attribute of Ibadur Rahman? It's the attribute of every individual. No. Every individual is asking for children. Ibadur Rahman are asking for the children which are pious and righteous. And so Allah, if our children aren't going to be righteous, then we do not need any children. If our wealth is not going to be beneficial for the hereafter, we do not need such wealth. Same thing is over here. World is diversion only for a few. For mu'min, it is a stage of reaching perfection and attaining the forgiveness and the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Where else will you be able to attain the highest kamal? Where else will you be able to reach the highest stages of perfection? Where else will you be able to reach the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Right in this world, not after you die. So for mu'min, it is a place, which is serving as a place for perfection and attaining the forgiveness. Whereas for kafir, it is the other way around. Number 7, severe punishment is repercussions of our own actions. But forgiveness and the grace is only from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever we have done bad is due to the azab that we're receiving is because of the bad things that we have done. But the forgiveness and the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not a result of something that we have done. It comes out of the grace and the lutf of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Insan must balance a life between fear and hope. Adabun shadid wa maghfiratum min Allahi wa ridwan. In education and training, ta'aleem and tarbiyat, there are 3 things that are essential, which this ayah points out to us. One is tabjeen, explanation. Second is tamthil, example. Third is conclusion, i'lamu. We see that the 3 are presented in this chapter, ayat number 20 of Surah Hadid. It starts out with saying i'lamu. What does that mean? It's an explanation. It's tabyin. I'lamu, let it be known. That's the first step of ta'aleem and tarbiyat. You want to give education, you want to inform them. Second is tamthil. You want to give examples so they can look around and learn from those examples. Tamthil is important. Kamathali ghayth. Allah gives the example of the rain, beneficial rain that comes down, how it produces, but the things that are produced, they're there for a while and then they dry up. So examples are very important when it comes to ta'aleem and tarbiyat. Lastly, conclusion. You got to also be able to draw the conclusion. What is the conclusion? Either adabun shadid or maghfirah. So what you do from the knowledge that was given to you and from the examples that were set in front of you, you could either gain and use it in your good conclusion, learn something from it, so it'd be maghfirat for you, or you can mess it up, it would be adabun shadid for you. So we see the khawf and raja, to be afraid and hopeful. We also recited an ayah today in Surah Rum, which was also talking about the same concept. These are the 2 elements of soul in the perfection of insan. It is impossible to reach any reform and improvement without these 2. You got to have fear, and at the same time, you got to have hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Without fear, insan will feel arrogant and above obedience. But when you have fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will feel submissive to his commands. Without hope, insan won't be able to bring correct reform inside and continue the path of corruption. Because he doesn't have any hope of, being forgiven, the person will continue down the path of corruption. I've done so many bad things. How many times you've heard, I've done so many bad things, one more. If you said this is makruh, you say, forget about makruh. I've done haram. What is the makruh in front of a haram? So this person has lost hope. When you lose hope, what happens? You to go down and tread down the path of further corruption. So what both of these things, being hopeful without doing anything, without any action, is merely a wish. You say, well, I'm very hopeful. Yeah, you got to be hopeful alongside with some actions. For example, if you lost something, and you say, I'm hopeful that I'll find it, but you're sitting at your own place, you're not moving around. That's not being hopeful. That means you're very wishful, or you got a lot of desires, but nothing will come true until you move about. So hopeful is when you are hopeful and at the same time you're acting. So both coupled together. So if umeed and raja, this hope and fear takes over insan, if it's only the umeed, if it's only the hope, then insan won't reach destination. Sinner and oppressor, with all the evilness, insan will believe that he's pious, clean, and he will receive the rahmat and the maghfirat of Allah. This person won't try to understand the ita'at, nor will he purify himself. Likewise, if it was only fear upon insan, if it takes over alone, without any hope, he will feel hopeless and in despair. Therefore, there's no inspiration for him or her to correct himself. This is where we see in the kalam of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam. He said, لَوْلَا الْأَمَلُ عَلِمَ الْإِنسَانِ حَسْبَ مَا هُوَ فِيهِ وَلَوْ عَلِمَ حَسْبَ مَا هُوَ فِيهِ مَاتَ مِنَ الْهَوْلِ وَالْوَجَلِ. He said, if there was no hope, insan would have recognized his rightful estate and thus died out of fear. If you had recognized your rightful estate, you would have died out of fear. Because of hope, you're still alive. Because of hope, you continue on going. This is where we read in other ayat of Quran. Allah says, وَلَا تَيْأَسُ مِنْ رَوْحِ اللَّهِ. Do not be in despair of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Umeed and this hopefulness is actually the key for the victory. This is why we see that our fourth Imam emphasized when a person by the name Zuhri, who had lost hope, Imam said to him, and very beautifully he said, إِنِّي أَخَافُ عَلَيْكَ مِنْ قُنُوتِكَ مَا لَا أَخَافُ عَلَيْكَ مِنْ ذَنْبِكَ. The way I fear of your hopelessness in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I do not fear for the sins that you have committed. For the sins you will be forgiven by Allah. But the hopelessness that you have developed, you will not be forgiven by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We see that even in the time of the Imam whose majlis or whose shahadat we are commemorating in these days and these nights, is also there were a lot of people who are in hope of our Imam. Imam, when he was struck on the 19th of Ramadan, and eventually when he died on the 21st of Ramadan, the two children of Imam Ali, Hassan and Hussein, take the janazah of their father. With the instructions that he had given, they take the janazah and they bury the janazah. And when they were returning back after having buried the janazah, they were passing by the ruins of the city. They came across a person who was weeping and crying and was asking for help. He said, is there anyone who would come for our help and give us something? This is where Hassanain alayhi stopped. They said to this old man that nobody looks after you? He said, yes. There was a person who used to look after us, but he hasn't showed up for the last 3 days. He said, do you remember anything about that person, what his name was, so we go ahead and inform him? He said, I don't know the person's name. He always mentioned himself to be servant of Allah. He said, is there anything else that you can call so we can recognize who this person might have been? He said, yeah, whenever this person would come, he would make dua. And whenever he was doing the tasbih of Allah, all the creations, even the stones and the pebbles and the walls, were doing the tasbih alongside with him. Hassanain recognized who this person was. They said, that was our Baba, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib. He will no longer come for your help. He will no longer be able to come and feed you the way he used to be able to do so, because we just buried him moments ago and he's no longer on this earth. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.